I mean, is it even possible to work in any field without any degree or job experience? So this is what we're going to be talking about exactly today. I'm going to be interviewing Ethan Francis, who is a 17-year-old developer relations advocate at Chainstack. We'll talk about whether it's possible to find a job in crypto Web3 without having a degree and without having much of the prior experience. I'm Ramon, founder of CryptoJobsList, the leading website for job search in crypto and Web3 industries. We're doing these interviews from time to time with some of the most interesting people in this industry to find out what it's like to be working in this space, whether you're technical, non-technical, whether you have education or have many years of experience. There is some piece of content and advice that you will find relevant here. All right, let's get started. Ethan, thank you so much for joining. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for our conversation today. I spent some time yesterday, of course, preparing for this, and I think there's a lot of questions to go over about DevRel and about starting a career at a young age. Of course, I'm not the only one in Web3 that is, full-time at a young age, because Web3 is a really interesting space with that type of opportunity. So I think we have a lot of good topics to go over today.
Amazing. So first of all, do a quick intro about yourself. Like, I think one of the highlight, a lot of people are kind of excited when someone is super young and working full-time in the industry. I think it's just a challenge overall to find a job when you're young, because everyone thinks oh, you need 10 years of experience. How can I get experience without experience? All these memes circulating around the internet. But I personally think that it's not true. If there is a will, there is a way. But at least that's my perception. Ethan, tell us about where you at. How did you start professionally, so to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy past 12 months in terms of getting started with the space and getting into a career. So I guess I can start back kind of when I first started. So I've been in the crypto space for about 3 years at this point. I first joined back in about 2020. I was 15 at that time, so I wasn't even legally allowed to work yet. I just was originally attracted by the altcoin run that was happening around that time, right? So this was kind of when the pandemic hit and the markets were doing pretty well, at least the crypto markets. It was probably 6 months before the big Bitcoin bull run. So I was attracted by that, and very quickly after I went into the space with the intention of trading and stuff like that, the underlying technology of blockchain, of course, was super interesting to me, at least. So I wanted to understand the development side of it. I'd already been super interested in things like, general application development, and I wanted to eventually go to college for software engineering. It's a little bit different today, but at that point I was super excited about blockchain. I was it became an obsession of mine almost. So, I was 15, 2020, started getting into this space, and then going into 2021, I really focused on the development side of things. So I retaught myself essentially Python, JavaScript, and then associated with that, Web3 PY, Web3 JS, foundational frameworks and libraries associated with Web3. Then later on in 2021, I would at that point been spending full time just enjoying the Web3 industry. And of course, that was a time in which it was much more active than it is today. It was very fast moving. It was super exciting at that time. So, I spent all day in different communities and talking to different people and engaging in different ways. And what I found through doing that was that I kind of identified a problem at that time. This was 2021. I probably just turned 16 or maybe almost turned 16. And the problem that I identified was that communities felt disconnected from Web3 itself, right? So I was talking in Discord and I was talking in Telegram and on Twitter and stuff, and I felt like, we use these Web 2 platforms to communicate Web 3 ideas, and I saw that as sort of an issue that I identified at that time. So I thought it would be a good idea to take what I had learned up to that point, which was about 6-7 months of learning, and apply it to a project that could solve this problem that I had identified. And that was a project that I created called Amity Defi. The point of this project was to essentially within Discord provide a MetaMask-like experience to users. So you could send crypto, operate a wallet, basically adds Web 3 functionality to Discord. And that's a big project for somebody who is 16 and can barely loop through a list in Python. But it was a really great experience because I took that time, 2021, I took a year to build this application. I learned a lot. I learned basically every corner of Web3 development. I learned exactly how blockchain architecture works. And I did this from probably June 2021 to June 2022 is how long I spent developing this application. Then I took the knowledge that I learned from creating Amity DeFi over that 1 year span. At that point, I had been working at a tire shop. So I got my first job when I turned 16 at a local tire shop where I was changing tires on cars, and I was fixing holes in tires and stuff. That's what my parents wanted me to do. And I decided that I spent all this time, building these applications and creating this knowledge in this space. Why not try and just go for it? Just see what I can do. See if I can maybe get an internship or some sort of job. So, this was May, June 2022, and I applied to hundreds of jobs, and I was just like throwing everything out there and saying maybe something can happen. I wasn't really enjoying changing tires too much. I wanted to create things and be a part of Web3. And that's when I had the very lucky opportunity of onboarding to Chainstack. So Chainstack was actually the first Web3 company that I interviewed with, and they were very happy to give me the opportunity to onboard. And that was June of 2022 when I first joined Chainstack. Took those 6 months for the rest of 2022 and learned a lot. I mean, the amount of transformation that happened those 6 months of just being ingrained in the industry and like networking with people and understanding DevRel skills was insane. And then 2023 came along and I had the opportunity to move and lead the developer relations team at Chainstack. And I took that, and I've been doing that for the past 6 months. It's been a pretty crazy journey so far.
Amazing. You mentioned something very interesting in the beginning. You said that initially you wanted to learn software engineering and go to college for software engineering. And then you said something like, but that changed. And then you moved on with your points. But so what changed? I thought it was very interesting. A lot of people dream about becoming software engineers.
Yeah, so, before I discovered Web3, of course, every kid wants to follow the path of like, you finish high school and you go to college and get a degree, and then you get a nice job at Google or Facebook or something. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of follow that path and eventually work at a FANG company or create a startup or something and do Web2 software engineering. And that was my plan for a long time. That's kind of the path that I was going down. Once I found Web3, of course, the software engineering part was really interesting. And for a long time, I didn't even really know what DevRel was until I eventually started with it in 2022. So even throughout my path in Web3 for those first few years, software engineering was still my primary goal, right? I wanted to maybe I got into Web3 software engineering or whatever. But it wasn't until I started in DevRel and started creating content and being more community focused and doing both the technical stuff, right? So still creating applications and creating technical content, but also being able to network with people and focus on communication, that I realized that software engineering wasn't something that effectively used the skill set that I've created for myself, right? Because DevRel, and we'll get into it later, but DevRel is a really interesting role because it uses technical talent, so software engineering, right? Being able to navigate and convey technical concepts with communication skills and community skills and content creation and stuff like this. Like, I know you guys did a video interview with Patrick Collins recently, and he's a great example of that, of, doing content in relation to like development, stuff like that. And I realized that that's where my passion was more so than pure software engineering, right? Being able to pair software engineering with something that I was passionate about, which was creating content and engaging with people directly. I realized that that's something that I wanted to do a lot more than software engineering. Since I realized that, since I first started DevRel back in 2022, that's where I've been focusing most of my efforts, and my plan is to continue in DevRel because I really enjoy this role, and I think it is a really fantastic and unique way to utilize a diverse set of skills.
Awesome. What would you say your definition of DevRel is? What is developer relations?
It's a really hard question. And when I was thinking about it, I was like, you could ask 100 DevRels throughout Web 2 and Web 3 and ask them all the same question. Ask them all, what is DevRel? And you'll probably get a different answer from everybody, because developer relations is a really unique position because it can be applied to pretty much any product, anything that has any relation with developers at all. DevRel fits in somewhere. And there's a lot of different types of companies that interact with developers, right? Whether you're selling something directly to developers like Chainstack does, or whether you are a company like Avalanche, right, which isn't selling to developers, but is creating a platform for developers to build things on, or, whatever it may be. DevRel applies to a hugely diverse set of organizations. So what DevRel actually looks like changes a lot depending on the type of organization. But, throughout my time, when I first joined Chainstack back in 2022, DevRel at Chainstack was a sales role, essentially. It was go reach out to people, sell a product, hit these certain numbers, and it was like marketing sales exclusively. And then since then, we've transitioned a lot into being a more balanced role that includes a lot more technical stuff and content creation, stuff like this. From that experience I've gained, usually, and of course I've talked to a lot of DevRels as well, and seen a lot of people move into different types of DevRel roles. But generally, the way that I define it is, I guess there's going to be two components I'll talk about here. And if I talk too much, feel free to stop me and I can...
Let's go.
So there's going to be two components of what I'm going to talk about. Number one, I'm going to talk about the parts of DevRel, so the components that make up DevRel. There's two. And then after that, I'll talk about the practical implementation of DevRel. So first of all, it's my belief that DevRel is primarily made up of two components. Touched on this briefly, but number one is that DevRel is made up of, the first component is one of three things. When you look at the word developer relations, this is in reference to relations. And this will depend on the organization. So the first component of DevRel will either be marketing, communications, or business development. It can sometimes be all three of these. It can be just one of them. It could be two two of them. It depends on the organization. At Chainstack, it's a little bit of marketing and business development. At a protocol, it might be more communications and business development. Somewhere it might be exclusively marketing, other places it might be exclusively communications, or somewhere it might be all three of these things, right? The first component is one of those three things: marketing, communications, or business development. The second component isn't as to interpretation. It's very constant throughout all DevRels, which is the developer part of the word. Developer relations, it's the technical side. Development, right? Having technical aptitude, being able to convey technical concepts. You can look at the developer relations word, and each word in that title has a meaning to what DevRel is. So relations is one of those three components. Developer is just technical stuff. Now, what this means in actual practical implementation is that the point of developer relations is to engage with developers. And it's very simple. If I could say it in three words, that would be what it is. So engage with developers, it's to build high quality relationships with developers. So to find people that you either want to use your product or are already using your product or your platform or whatever you're creating, or to empower people that are currently being onboarded into your product, whatever it may be. The goal of a DevRel is to achieve something that traditional marketing, business development, or communications usually fail at, which is effective developer engagement. And the reason they fail at these things is because they don't understand the developer journey, they don't understand developer concepts, they don't understand the technical side of things, which is fine because they're not expected to. But that's where DevRel comes in. DevRel comes in to be a middle ground for those things, to have somebody that understands technical side, that understands the developer communities, that can apply the foundations and the expectations of things like marketing, business development, communications, etc., with the general goal of engaging with developers, empowering developers, and doing this through the means of content creation. So you have people like Patrick Collins who creates these 30-hour video tutorials that are awesome that developers can leverage to learn really complicated technologies. Where you have people doing Twitter spaces or video interviews like these, or whatever it may be, to engage with developers and support developers. This is the primary purpose of DevRel, in my opinion, at least.
To me, it sounds like it's really very cross-disciplinary. I can't help but wonder, what are some KPIs that you guys, maybe like some KPIs that you guys set for yourself within Chainstack, and what do you think some KPIs that DevRels in general should measure themselves against? Because I feel it's like, what is it like? Are you measuring how many developers install your SDK? Are you measuring the traffic on site? I think it can be very confusing to a lot of people. How should effective DevRel be measured?
It's another really big problem and thing to solve. We spent, once I moved on to developer relations lead here at Chainstack, we spent a long time figuring the answer to that question, right? Figuring out what that is. So we did a lot of work in that regard. We went through a lot of iterations, since I joined Chainstack originally. We tried a lot of different methods of KPIs and expectations, stuff like this. And eventually what we found is that for Chainstack at least, and of course it's going to vary widely depending on the organization. So most organizations have one of two ways of measuring KPIs, right? Number one is through effort, right? So doing like not looking at results, just looking at effort. So these are things like, do this amount of content, this amount of Twitter spaces, or write this amount of technical documentation, talk to this many developers, or do this many talks a week, or whatever it may be, right? These are some base KPIs that measure effort. And most DevRels, as you'll see, will have some sort of effort-based KPI, right? A lot of them will say, I need to produce 2 pieces of content a week, or I need to create two Twitter threads, or host 3 Twitter spaces, or whatever it may be, right? These are usually pretty standard, but they don't usually guarantee results, right? And it's a very narrow sight to look at KPIs, because the big value of DevRel for organizations, and of course it depends, but it usually lies somewhere between onboarding developers and creating value in that sector. So the second way to KPI DevRels is usually through value creation. So measuring directly how much value they've created as a DevRel. And of course, it's another hard thing because it's like, well, if the market pumps and 100,000 developers come into the space, then, well, you didn't do anything that's not a result of your value, that's just a result of the market. Same way, if 100,000 developers leave the market, then it's like, well, you don't really have control over that. So that was a big problem with us, and we were trying to figure out, how do we measure KPIs that don't reflect the value being brought by a DevRel and not external factors like market movements and stuff like this. So it's kind of complicated to explain, but with Chainstack, we came up with a system of measuring developer activity, pairing that with, for Chainstack, of course, because we are a high performance, affordable Web3 infrastructure provider, right? So we provide services to developers like RPC nodes and subgraphs, et cetera. We measured developer signups per protocol. So we assign a DevRel to a protocol. Maybe if you're onboarding a DevRel to Chainstack, we say you'll do Binance Smart Chain, right? You'll focus on that. Focus on engaging with developers as part of that chain. And we'll look at developer activity on Binance, how that's been scaling with the market, and from these numbers, we'll do some kind of clever calculations and come up with an impact that you had. So we'll say you had a 6% impact to our developer signups to this protocol, or you had this many developer signups approximately that you drove through your content and stuff like this. So those are the two lanes of KPIs that we focus on, and I think most organizations, if they don't right now, they probably will end up moving there. It's number one, measuring effort, right? So for me, it's usually content, Twitter spaces, stuff like that. And number two, measuring results. because on one hand, you can measure effort and have things like, do Twitter Spaces, do content, do hackathons, workshops, whatever. But, there's a lot of things that DevRels do that are outside of those things, like those direct developer engagements, like just participating in the community, being active on Twitter, networking with people. And these things are harder to KPI, so you cover everything else with the KPI of the results. So that's when we say, we want 5% a month impact on our signups from you, or we want this many developers that you onboard. Or if you're a protocol, maybe it's, we want this many people to start using our SDK or whatever it may be, right? These are usually KPIs that I recommend and that I usually see most DevRels adopting.
Now that we have our KPIs set, how does one actually become good at being a DevRel?
It's another hard question. Of course, throughout my year of DevRel, it's a question that I've been trying to answer myself. How to be good at this. When I first joined DevRel, I was very much in a learning state of my career. So I was focused on understanding the role and understanding where I'm at and how all this fits together. But what I've learned over the past year, and we're actually coming up on about 13 months now of DevRel for me, full-time DevRel, 10 hours a day. What I've learned is that usually, number one, before you can move into DevRel and focus on optimizing skill set, number one, of course, you need to be confident in the two sectors that I mentioned earlier. So before we even start with DevRel, before you can start being good at DevRel, you need to make sure that you are confident in your ability to communicate, to create content, to do things like Twitter Spaces, to engage directly with developers. That skill set needs to be honed in on first and foremost before anything else as a foundation. Number two is that you need to be confident in your technical skill set, right? You need to be confident in your ability to create applications, to understand technical concepts, to understand new technology. And once you have these two sort of hemispheres, once you're confident in skills within these two groups, right? That's when you can start optimizing your DevRel position. That's when you start focusing on specific things like one-on-one engagement. I tell this to everybody, but as a DevRel, beyond the base things like creating content, Twitter Spaces, stuff like this, the best thing you can do is directly engaging with developers, understanding how they think, understanding what they want from you, what they want from the organization that you represent, and implementing that. Right? If people really enjoy when you create content about using a specific library that your protocol provides, then focus on that. Or if people really like when you create 32-hour Foundry video tutorials, then focus on that, right? And, I think most of the best DevRels that we see in this space are the best DevRels because they focus on one vertical that they're really good at, and they thrive in that area, right? And they do this because they listen to people, they engage with people, they network with people, and they understand what people want from them, and they apply that to themselves. And this is what makes DevRels really effective, right? Of course, it's developer relations. You're building relationships, and a lot of people don't understand that. It's really at its foundation, it's talking to people and listening to them and taking that into account and applying that to yourself. So, again, I don't want to talk about Patrick Collins too much, but I think he's another good example of, he listens to people and he saw, his first big video tutorial that was 36 hours or something like that. People like that, and he understands that. And he says, well, this is something that works, so I'm going to lean into that. I'm going to do more of this. Or you have people like Nader, right? This is another very famous DevRel where he's really great at community building and engaging with people and building relationships directly. And he's, leaned into that. I think as a DevRel, to elevate yourself from just somebody who's good at technical understanding and content creation, to elevate yourself onto a level where you can now be, a good DevRel, I guess, if that's the term you want to use. It's to find a niche that works for you, right? Find a vertical of DevRel that you enjoy, that you're passionate about, right? If that's content creation, if that's Twitter Spaces, if that's community engagement, whatever it may be, and focus on honing your skills in that area. Right? And of course, this is after you've created the foundational DevRel skills that I mentioned earlier. And once you have this, and once you focus on that, the rest of your skills will elevate with you, right? And then you'll get to a point where you are really good at one thing, and everybody knows you because of this one thing, and you're also really good at a bunch of other things, so you can lean into those if you want. But, when I think of a good DevRel, that's always what I think of, right? Somebody who excels in one area. So if you're already a DevRel, then that's what I'd recommend that you do. Focus on one area. If you're not a DevRel, then I'd really recommend to start working on those things. Start building these foundational skills, right, that are part of DevRel, right? The technical side, the communication side. And then once you're there, start networking with people. Start understanding what they want from you. Start understanding what they enjoy from you, what type of content they like, and lean into that and build your skills in the area that people communicate to you that they find valuable.
Do you feel there are any benefits of being young and having that as your first job being in DevRel, or does it make no difference at all? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. What do you think?
I mean, I think DevRel is a really interesting role because it almost transcends age, if that makes sense. Like I've worked with DevRels that are younger than me even. Like I know 17-year-old DevRel sounds like the youngest in the space, but I work with people that are 16, even 15 in the space that are working in Dev Rel internships, especially on like Solana. I'm in a Telegram group with a bunch of guys that are younger than me that are working in Dev Rel. And I've also worked with people that are 20, even 30 years old, older than I am, right? Which is insane. I mean, the range of DevRels is insane, right? The fact that I can be working with somebody that's 56 years old and then turn around and work with somebody that's 15 years old, and they're working in the same job function. I think it's a really special part of DevRel, right? DevRel, and this is true of Web3 in general, and we might get into this more later, but generally, DevRel doesn't care about who you are intrinsically. Whatever age you have, it doesn't matter where you come from, what country you're from, whatever, what languages you speak. DevRel and Web3 in general cares more about the value that you bring. If you can prove that you can bring value to the community and to your organization, then you can do DevRel. It's that simple, right? Proving that you are competent at understanding certain concepts and understanding the community, understanding developers, and then in the same breath, proving that you can bring value in those areas. This is how you can be a good DevRel. And I see a lot of young people, of course, including myself, that lean into this because it's an easy thing to get into, right? Being able to start creating that content. And it's fun, right? It's fun to create content, engage with people, and build relationships. So I see a lot of people get into it, and it's a really fantastic path. And like I said, there's a lot of people even younger than me, which is hard to believe in Web3, but that's just what Web3 enables as a community, right? It doesn't care. A part of this, the topic here was like a degree, right? So like even if you're not 17 years old or you're not 50 years old and you're somewhere in the middle, and let's say you don't have a big education, it's the same idea there, right? You don't need to have a master's degree or a bachelor's degree or any like high level formal education to start in DevRel, because it really is as simple as proving that you know what you're talking about, right? You know these concepts, and that through the concepts that you've learned and the skills that you've learned, you can drive value to an organization. If you can prove that, then you can do DevRel.
What is that path for someone from joining from no experience to full-time or like low experience? I mean, you did mention once again that, degree is not really required, and I think I think a lot of people accept that, but I think still a lot of companies would prefer having some experience or some set of experiences. And I think it's reasonable for a lot of companies, especially smaller size organizations. They are hiring aggressively. They cannot afford people making mistakes within that team. So they really want someone with at least like a few years or maybe like a college or so like this like blue stamp of approval perhaps. What do you feel, what are those steps that people of maybe your generation are able to take to be able to have a few projects on their own under their belt before they even start applying? Or how can they like persuade the company, the hiring manager to accept them?
Yeah, I mean, it's another interesting thing. And of course, I got very lucky with Chainstack, and that they were the first Web3 company that I interviewed with, and that was after probably 200 job applications. So it's like if you have low experience, especially if you're younger, don't expect to get a full-time position, at least very quickly. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of, just like consistency. But generally, the advice that I give people is that number one, before anything, you need to make sure that, and like I mentioned this a few times, make sure that you have the skill set to start. So don't think about necessarily applying for jobs unless you know things like foundational programming languages. Make sure that you understand fully like Java, JavaScript, Python, stuff like this. Make sure that you understand Web3, of course. Once you're confident in your skill set, basically, like once you feel it's in a good place, once you feel that you're in a place with your skill set where you can drive value, right? That's when you can start being proactive in your career. And this isn't, it's never a guarantee. It just takes consistency and being very motivated. The best shot that you can get, right, whether you're my age or older or whatever, is that number one, start building a project. And, I have people message me all the time. Like they ask me, how do I start a career in Web3? What path should I take? I always tell them to start a project, right? Find something that you're passionate about. Find a problem that you're passionate about. So I'm sure if you use Web3 regularly, there's something that you've identified that doesn't sit right with you, right? Like I was talking to somebody the other day, he messaged me and he found a problem that he felt like there should be some refundability component in like NFT pre-sales, because he thought that would prevent scams. Like that's a problem that you can identify, right? And that's what he's building now. That's how you build a career. That's how you start building a career, by building something that you're passionate about, right? Don't build something just because you want a project under your belt or just because you want experience, because then you won't really learn, right? You won't build something that you care about. It's much more effective to build things that you're passionate about building. So find that problem that resonates with you within Web3 and start solving it, right? Whether that solution is an application or it's even just like a big piece of technical writing or whatever it may be, right? Or a project. Maybe your solution is that there's not enough subgraph content in Web3, and then you want to start a project of releasing one piece of subgraph content a day. Or if it's something more technical like creating an application, whatever it may be, start a project, right? Whether it's development or otherwise, and go through with it. And it should come out of passion for the project that you're doing. It shouldn't be just to get experience. And once you've done this for long enough, once you've created a project that you're passionate about and that you feel strongly about, and that proves that you have skills, again, like I mentioned, if you can prove that you know what you're talking about, that you've spent time doing these things in this space, then you're good to go, basically. So, once you've spent time building this out, create a project that works for you. That's when you can start applying for jobs if you want. But again, don't have high expectations for that, because a lot of the time, who knows what can happen. Sometimes maybe you'll get a call back on the first apply. Maybe it'll take 500 applications before you get there. But either way, it's important to be as proactive as possible. What that means is that as you're building this project, once you finish building the project, network as much as you possibly can. Be as active as you can, right? Show up in the community every day. Engage with people on Twitter, message people, say hello, right? Ask people questions, get on calls with people just to learn about them. Start building these relationships, build this network for yourself. Because if you start applying for jobs with zero network, right, then it's going to be difficult. But if you apply for jobs with 100 people backing you, that are people within the industry, names within the industry that you've spent time creating these relationships with, then getting a job will be significantly easier. Right? Most of the people that I've talked with, people that are younger than me a lot of the time, the reason they have jobs and that they're DevRels a lot of the time is because of relationships that they built for themselves, right? Because they've reached out to somebody and asked them a question, or even just asked to do DevRel for their company. And they've done this in tandem with proving value through projects and through content, through things that they built. So those are the lanes that you can go through to get a career, right? It's the number one, building things, creating a skill set for yourself, providing value to the community on something that you feel passionate about. On the other hand, networking with people constantly, being proactive and generating opportunities for yourself. Don't wait for an opportunity to come up, right? Reach out to people, apply for things, do whatever it takes, I guess, to kind of get to the position where you want, and be motivated to do so, because if you're not, then it'll be much more difficult. But really the number one thing is to find something in the space that you're passionate about. So then at that point, whether you get a job permit or not, it doesn't matter, because you've built something and you've done something that you're proud of. And that's really what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of good advice here. I personally resonate the most about finding something that you're really passionate about and just working on that project. I mean, no one should have very high expectations that the project will become the next $1 billion thing. It's most likely to fail. But I think when they're just getting started, everyone knows I need skills. But learning skills, just learning some programming language, learning how to write, feels a little bit empty. It's very hard. But if you have a project that you're really passionate about, you will move mountains. You'll learn anything. Just to achieve that, just to build that thing that you're trying to build, or that community or software. You will learn that language. You will learn how to communicate to people. You will realize that marketing is such an important part, and how difficult it is, or it can be difficult. Yes, I think it's like a mini MBA without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on MBA school. Anyway, before we move into more career-related advice and questions, I have a few more questions about DevRel specifically. What would you say is the difference between DevRel and Web 2 and Web 3?
I'll talk about a lot of Web 2 DevRels and Web 3 DevRels, and I think really the difference is the type of developers that you're engaging with. Of course, the core of DevRel is engaging with developers. So and I'm sure most people in here are aware, the culture difference, especially in developers from Web 2 to Web 3, is huge. I've attended conferences, I've gone to ETH Denver, and I've gone to these different places, and Web3 developers are a much different audience to engage with than Web2 developers, right? It requires more of this one-on-one engagement. It requires more community interaction. You need to be more dedicated to creating content and doing Twitter spaces. You need to be more personable a lot of the time. I see a lot of Web2 DevRels, and their jobs look way different than Web3 DevRels. But I think it's good. I prefer the Web3 DevRel usually, because it's a lot more personal with developers. You're creating genuine relationships, because that's what a lot of people want in Web3. I think it's a great part of Web3 is that it's very community focused. And you can't say the same thing about Web2, because Web2 is a huge corporate enterprise thing. So I see Web3 DevRel as far less corporate, a lot more personal. So, if you're a Web2 DevRel right now and you want to get into Web3 DevRel, then really I think the number one thing to do is spend time ingraining yourself in the community. That's the best way you can figure out how developers think, because it really is a lot different than Web 2. The ways that they build things, the tools that they use, how they do it, their thought processes with these things. So spending time in the community, right? I mean, 5 hours a day, 8 hours a day, how much time you want to dedicate to it. On Twitter, in Discord, on Twitter Spaces, listening to people and understanding them. This is how you make that transition, because really the main difference is culture, thought processes, and stuff like that. As well as, of course, the tech side. The tech side is wildly different, right? Blockchain technology is much different than creating an HTML front end. I mean, it's a completely different beast. So, I see a lot of Web 2 people, and I talked with one. I did a similar space with a guy probably 7 or 8 months ago, and he came directly from Facebook, from Meta, to Web3. to a Web3 development company. He was a developer. He wasn't a Dev Rel. But I talked to him and I was like, what do you think about Web3? And he was like, it's way different. He wasn't expecting to be that different. And, even for, I've been in Web3 for 3 years now. Every day I'm learning something new. I'm meeting new people. I'm learning more about the space and more about how everything functions. It's never I to put this in my thread I posted a while ago. What I usually say is that Web3 has no experts. There's no experts in Web3 because there's too much to learn. There's too much happening. Nobody can be 100% knowledgeable all the time, which is why it's important to spend as much time as you can during that transition from Web2 to Web3, whether it's in DevRel or whether it's in general software development or product development or whatever it may be. Spending time understanding the community, understanding the tech. These are the two main components. And if you can understand these, then you'll have a very easy time making that transition with these two components in mind.
What would you say is right now we're in a bear market, and I think the reality of crypto Web3 is very correlated to price of Bitcoin, ETH, overall sentiment, SEC suing everyone's suing SEC hopefully. I think a lot of developers and a lot of people just go out from the industry, from the space, and no one wants to build anything. Some people still want to build things, but I think the morale overall, if you compare it to peak of bull market, is much lower. How would you rate the current state of Web3, from a developer perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this briefly in the beginning, but unfortunately Web3 is in a much less exciting state right now compared to a year and a half ago. I mean, a year and a half ago it was millions of dollars flowing into the space, and now VC funding is at an all-time low. Jobs aren't moving as quickly. The space isn't moving as fast, which I don't think is a bad thing. I'm of the opinion that the type of market and ecosystem that we're in right now is a once in a lifetime opportunity for developers and for people that want to build a career in Web3. It's the same way with investing ideology, right? When you're investing in something, when you're buying a stock, right? You don't buy when that stock has gone up 8 times, right? 800%. You buy when it's down, right? This is just general investing. I see spending time building a career and building applications in the Web3 industry, I see that the same way. I think that now, when we're in this time of less activity and less money and lower prices, and there's not as much activity in terms of developers and stuff like this, I think that's the perfect time to build. It's an opportunity that you don't want to miss for yourself, right? Because now, if you take the time to build now, we could just talk about developers first. Mm-hmm. If you take the time to build applications now and you build something that, again, you're passionate about and that you think solves a real problem within the industry, then whenever the bull run comes, whenever that may be, maybe it's next year, maybe it's in 2 years, maybe it's in 5 years. I mean, who really knows at this point? But whenever that happens at some point, you'll have a product that you're passionate about, that you've spent this time developing and honing in on and improving, that will be ready for this next wave of adoption. And you don't want to get stuck when that adoption hits. You don't want to get stuck building your product, because by the time you've built it, it's going to die down. We're going to be in another winter. That's just how things happen. You're no, I wish that I found Web3 and that I went into Web3 back in 2018, 2019. Because if I did, I'd be in a much different position right now. I'd be, I would have built stuff and we'd be having a different conversation right now. But instead, I joined just as everything started hitting. So I was there during the big activity flash. And, now, of course, I have the opportunity to start building that career and building applications and stuff. And I think this is an opportunity that shouldn't be passed up by developers and by people that want to get into the space professionally. Because really, when you're in a bull run, of course it'll be easier to get a job and it'll be easier to do these different things. But if you start a bull run in a market upcycle with a product already built out, or with skills that you need, right, to land a job and to build a career, you will do 10 times better than somebody that starts when that bull run hits. So what you're doing now in this time, I see it as sort of investing in yourself, right? You're betting on yourself that you'll succeed when this happens. And I think it's incredibly important that developers and that anybody that wants to get into the space that maybe isn't already fully ingrained takes the opportunity that's presented right now, and takes advantage of that and learns skills, starts creating applications that they're passionate about, that they think solve problems. That way they're prepared for whenever this next bull run comes. Mm-hmm. And that's, of course, a big part of why I spend all the time in Web3 that I do, because I think that, whenever this happens, we'll start to see a huge wave of innovation and a lot of people adopting current products, which is where you'll see the people that succeed most in the next bull run will be the people that are building today.
I think started building during the peak of the bull market is definitely a little bit too late. You're up for a big crash. This just a personal story. This reminds me a lot about myself. I discovered Bitcoin back in 2014. And I think I just like bought in right before the big crash. I think it was Mt. Gox crash, and I kind of like lost interest. I was busy with my other projects, with my other startups, and only in 2017 I joined full time again. And looking back, I realized, damn, that winter from 2014 till 2017, that bear market was like the best time to. Back in the day, that was Reddit. Where was it at? I wish I was like building during the time, spending my time to read on, developing some new tech, payment gateways, new next exchange. So I highly agree with this advice. Is bear market is the best time to learn, build, and prepare yourself for the run during the bull market. Yeah. Okay. Moving up to career, like a few more questions specifically about like career search. How would you say people who are young, maybe just general advice, not necessarily DevRel specific, how someone should kind of gain their skills or approach finding a career, a job in Web3 and crypto? Is it through courses on YouTube? Should they read? Should they just try to look for internships? Do you know any like hacks or tactics that would help?
I think the big thing is taking your time with it, and whether that is through things like, and we'll get into this in a moment, but with whether it's things with courses or building a project or doing an internship, it can today it can feel like almost pressure for a lot of people to create a career, and like, oh, I need to get started now, like, and a lot of people they tend to compare themselves with, they see other people on social media and stuff like this, and like, oh, I have to get started, I have to like land an internship, and I need to build all these things. And when you rush like that, you lose a lot of the ability to truly learn these concepts and to create things that you're passionate about. When I started, when I was building Amity, and I was, in the community, I had no intention of ever getting a career out of it. I didn't even know that I would be in this position today. I was just building it because I thought it was something cool, and I had nothing else to do. So I just enjoyed it, right? And I, some days I spent 30 minutes on it. Some days I spent 8 hours on it. I just did it as I wanted to, right? And this is a big part of like healthily learning in Web3 and starting a career, right? It's, of course, do things like engage with people like we've been talking about, networking with people, building a project that you're passionate about, taking courses if you want. We just recently announced a partnership with Learn Web3 DAO, which is an incredible organization doing some really great stuff, teaching developers. Whether it's stuff like that, whatever it may be, taking your time with it and being as methodical as possible, right? Not overdoing yourself, not feeling pressure to reach a certain goal or whatever. That's how you win the race in Web3. It's doing things that you want to do, and that's really, really important, right? Do what you want. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. It's that's as simple as that when you're creating a career, because if you're forcing yourself to do things that you're not happy about or that you don't find personal value in, right? If you don't think it's valuable to create applications, then don't do it. If you don't think it's valuable to create content, then don't do it. Find something else that fits your skill set and your interests. Because once you do that, once you find a role and once you find a project and a course or whatever that truly interests you and motivates you to work and create things, that's when you'll be really successful, and it'll be natural. It won't even be like, oh, I have to do this much and I have to like work this hard. It'll just be like you enjoy doing it, and that's what comes out of it eventually as a career. And I think especially when you're young getting into this, that's the number one thing to think about, right? If you're in Web3 and it's not for you, then it's not for you. There's a million industries, of course, that you can go into. And I think if you enjoy Web3, maybe DevRel's for you, maybe just pure software engineering is for you, maybe product development, maybe it's community management, maybe it's hosting a podcast, maybe it's writing a newsletter, like whatever it is. I think the number one most important like piece of advice that I can personally give is to find a component of Web3 that excites you, and then do that. And if you can spend time on that, and then of course through that medium, right? If that medium is development, then take courses like Learn Web3 DAO. Go learn that. If you're really interested in community development, then go learn from individuals, right? Talk to people, engage with the community, learn that naturally. If you really want to develop your own startup, then start creating a personal application, right? Start creating a project. Find a path of learning that works for the vertical within Web3 that makes you happy and that makes you excited. If you can find these things, if you can find number one, the vertical that you're passionate about, and number two, content and learning in an educational path that guides you through that vertical, then by the end of it, after a year, after 2 years, you'll be in a really great position to start a career. At that point, hopefully you would have networked with enough people and created enough stuff just naturally through motivation to use as a launching point into a career, whether that first step is an internship potentially. Maybe it is. I know there's a lot of people like Avalanche, for example, is doing Dev Rel internships right now. Or whether it's an entry-level role, like that's what it was for me. It was very much just like, let's see how it goes. Whatever, right? Maybe it's starting your own company. This is what a lot of people do. Maybe it's your own startup, your own big project that you're going into full-time. Whatever that first career step is for you, it should be backed with time of finding that vertical and learning within that vertical. And once you've achieved these things, you'll be set up for a career essentially. And that's at least my experience.
If we were to get a bit more specific with sources of like learning and education, what would you say is like some underrated channel or source or where you're getting new information or learning from? Is that, I mean, I think Twitter is maybe overrated to some extent, but do you spend a lot of time on Discord, Twitter, I don't know, YouTube videos, Reddit? Maybe there's some niche communities that no one ever heard of that are underrated. Give us some alpha.
Yeah, I love Discord. Discord is, I'm on there just as much as I'm probably on Twitter a little bit too much, maybe at an unhealthy level. But Discord is also a really great resource for people. There's a million Discord communities. And the great thing about Discord is, Twitter, it's a little bit different. It's like a message board almost. It's like, you tweet and you reply to people, and it's not as personal in terms of messaging and stuff like this. So when you go to Discord, you're in a chat room and everybody's chatting in the same line. And it's an incredible environment for learning, right? So I'm in the Crypto Devs Discord a lot. I'm in the Learn Web3 DAO Discord a lot. Of course, we have the Chainstack Discord, which is fantastic for if you want to go in there and ask any questions about infrastructure or development or even like DevRel and stuff like that. We have a team of over 70 people that are already Web3 professionals. I would love to help you out with that. But finding communities that, of course, fit with you, right? So whether it's the Chainstack Discord or whether it's Learn Web3 DAO or Crypto Devs is another good one that I mentioned. There's a few other communities that I love, like MTopSwap, a bunch of other guys, Solana Collective for Solana people, Lamport DAO. I mean, I'm just throwing off names here that I visit on a daily basis. Finding a community of people that you resonate with and that share the same vision as you is a really great way to learn, right? Because a lot of times, and like I mentioned, is learning from people is a great way to kickstart knowledge that you would have never gotten from a course, right? Because everybody has a different experience, everybody has a different level of understanding of the space, and understanding this variety of perspective is really important. So that's why Discord is important. And of course, Twitter is a way to do that too. Twitter can be a little bit difficult sometimes. It can be saturated with engagement farming and stuff, which can sometimes convolute your path of learning. But Learn Web3 DAO is a fantastic website. Crypto Zombies is really cool for like Solidity stuff. Mm-hmm. Of course, if you're looking to development exclusively, we have at Chainstack, we've been working really hard recently, our developer experience team, on creating technical content and educational content for people. We call this our Web3 Decoded series, where you can learn subgraph development, you can learn based on a bunch of protocols, Solana, Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, etc. So you can always go to chainstack.com and head over to our Web3 Decoded series. And that's another really great place that not a lot of people know about right now to learn technical concepts. We also have our blog posts, which we cover tons of stuff. Like recently we've been posting some stuff about cryptocurrency wallets. And, there's the amount of educational material in Web3 can be overwhelming sometimes because there's so much of it, right? Everyone has some sort of educational content usually. What's important is finding the content that resonates with you. Because not all of it will, most of it won't, right? A lot of the time, if you go through a piece of educational content, you come out of it thinking like, I don't have no idea what I just watched, I don't know what just happened, then you should probably go find a different method of content delivery or whatever. So it's about finding things that fit with your content preference, right? And doing this through whether it be Discord communities or just looking on your Twitter feed or whatever. It's about finding what fits for you. My personal favorites, so of course, are going to be Discord and Twitter and things like our Web3 Decoded series and whatnot.
You mentioned you joined the industry, or at least you joined Chainstack in 2020, right?
2022. Yeah.
2022, okay, even more recent.
Right.
Do you feel anything changed in kind of the job landscape? Do you think it's easier to get jobs right now, or is it easier to get started or not? What's your take on like the overall ecosystem right now?
Yes, when I joined Chainstack in 2022, of course, that was 2 years after that path of like learning and stuff, what we've been talking about. After I joined, when I first joined, that was right after like the market started turning down and everybody was scared about a recession, and like we were just starting to finally like get over the pandemic and everything, and it's kind of a weird time like economically, and we've seen that unfortunately not go up much since then, since kind of June of 2022 up to now, which has been a little over a year. We're still seeing a little bit of a downturn in the job market. I do know that there was a report recently that came out from CryptoJobsList actually that showed a pretty decent uptick recently, which I was happy to see. I think that we're starting to see a little bit of a turnaround here in these coming months, but at least recently over the past like 6 months, 12 months, the job market hasn't been great. But again, I think this is just naturally a result of like the bear market and like less funding being in the space. So right now, and of course, as soon as a bull market comes, you're going to see a 10x increase in job postings, and everybody's going to want to hire people, which will be great because everybody that's in the space right now has the opportunity to start building the skills and building a career to be ready for that. I think the Web3 job ecosystem is really interesting because, of course, it takes that same approach that DevRel does, and that it's open to anybody that can prove that they know something and that they can provide value to something. This is like at the core of Web3 values, right? It's like open and permissionless. Jobs are in a lot of ways the same way. Prove that you could be trusted almost, to use like a blockchain term, and prove that you have skills and you can contribute in that way. If you can generate skills now, you'll be ready for that. And I think that hopefully over the next 12 months from now, maybe, June 2024, hopefully we'll be in a much different place than we are today. But if you're ready to start applying for jobs, I wouldn't say don't. I think definitely it's still an environment right now. I see job postings all the time. CryptoJobsList has a fantastic selection of jobs right now.
Thanks for the shout out.
Some really great, there's some awesome positions over there. Some really cool companies hiring. So if you guys are ready for that, and you spent the last little amount of time building up these skills, then definitely start applying. And of course, CryptoJobs is probably the place to do that. As you start, maybe you're not ready, and if you aren't, then now's the time to start investing in yourself and betting that you will be ready in the next few years as the job market specifically starts to tick back up as the industry as a whole does.
I think earlier you mentioned something along the lines that it might take a few times for you to figure out what's your fit in the industry or fit within DevRel more specifically. Maybe can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of DevRels in the past. When I was promoted to DevRel lead about 6 months ago, there's a few people under me, and I've seen them move to different companies. Some of them have even gone to like Ava Labs and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I see that because of the dynamic nature of DevRel, and really most roles in Web3, it'll look very different depending on the organization that you go to. Because of that dynamic nature, it's important to find a company that fits your values. And again, it all comes down to the source of like being motivated to work every day in Web3. If you aren't motivated by the people around you, if you aren't motivated by your job function, you're going to find it very difficult to grow. So that's why it's important to find a fit for you, right? If you're in DevRel, and that's especially important, right? Finding a company that shares the same values that you do, finding a product that you're passionate about as a developer, right? So like for me, the reason why I've been at Chainstack for so long is because I'm very excited about the product. I think that we're providing real value to developers through highly affordable infrastructure, highly performant infrastructure. I think that developers are really enjoying this. But you need to find a product like that fits for you, right? Maybe you're really passionate about DeFi. I've seen a lot of DevRels from Balancer recently. Maybe you're really passionate about protocols like Avalanche, and then you go to a place like Avalanche, right? And on top of the technology itself, of course, the team needs to enable you to do what you enjoy and to have this balance within the industry, being able to continue your growth, being empowered by the company that you're working at to grow. Every DevRel is going to be different, right? We're all working the same function. Every DevRel is different in terms of what they want out of the role, what they want to contribute to the community, and what they're able to contribute to the community. So it's really important to find an organization that fits those needs. And of course, part of this can be done through interviewing and just like working at a place for a certain amount of time. But once as a DevRel, once you find a fit for you, once you find an organization that you're happy with and that you feel passionate about, again, it all comes down, like I said, to that motivation piece, and then you'll grow much faster than if you're stuck in an organization that maybe you don't feel as strongly about. It's really important to find that fit for your own personal growth in your career.
I think I've been scrolling LinkedIn quite a bit recently, and I've been following you for a few weeks now, not longer than that. You do post a lot of video content, right? Like some interviews, and you've done this a few times before. What would you say? Is there any significance to doing video content? Pros, cons of doing it? Some people are video shy, or they think so. I don't think it's a thing. Did video open any doors for you that I think otherwise would have been closed?
Yeah, I love video content. I think video content is really, it's much more engaging. I love Twitter Spaces. I've done hundreds of Twitter Spaces. I've probably almost 200 Twitter Spaces now since I started a year ago. But I think video content just approaches a whole different level of like direct engagement, right? Being able to attach a face to a name, especially in like the anonymous world of Web3, right? Being able to see somebody and talk about their concepts and have that different level of like communication. I think it's game changing, especially when you're conveying complicated concepts. Like, I've done probably close to 7 or 8 big video interviews over the last year. So, I started with a few when I first started, and just even over the past few weeks, I've done 2 or 3. And these are really great ways to engage with people. And when you're explaining a tough concept like Web3 infrastructure and data indexing and stuff like this, having that additional context of the video can be a game changer for that type of understanding, right? Being able to really take in a concept it could be a lot easier when you're looking at somebody and watching them explain something. So I think that video content, and I post even like non-webcam video content all the time. I do recently I've been really enjoying making these build X in X amount of time, right? So I did one, it was build subgraph in 5 minutes, or deploy a subgraph in 60 seconds, and launch a Solana SPL token in 2 minutes, right? I think these are also really great because, of course, videos allow for something that, articles can't, right? Which is where you can watch somebody do something. In this case, it's development stuff. You can watch somebody create a subgraph, and you can follow along and listen to the commentary and the text on screen, and it just allows for a much more engaging way of learning things, in my opinion, at least. From everybody's learning style is different, but I really like videos, and I'm always very happy to do video interviews and create video content. I think it's a really engaging content medium.
John, on Web3, do you think there is an issue with global Web3 adoption? And do you think Web3 will completely replace Web2 in the future?
I think that Web3 is an interesting medium, and I was talking on a thread about this not too long ago, but it's like right now, the definition of Web3 is really loose. It's like Web3 doesn't have a straight definition, in my opinion. Web3 right now is Web 2.5, essentially. Web3 depends on Web 2 infrastructure. Right now, we're talking on Twitter Space, it's a Web 2 application. In the video interview, we're using Riverside on Google Chrome, on a Windows computer. These are all Web 2 applications, right? We rely on Web 2 infrastructure to interact with Web 3. So I think that necessarily transitioning from Web 2 to Web 3, I don't know what that would look like necessarily. I think what we'll see instead is that over the next few years, we'll start to see further adoption of Web 3 products through Web 2 means, right? So we'll see more people creating crypto wallets or doing whatever new adoption technique we create by then to interact with decentralized systems. And I think most of that will be abstracted behind different layers. And I think generally right now Web3 is in a place where it's not user-friendly for most people, right? I mean, if you put MetaMask and dApps in front of a 75-year-old that can barely use Facebook, I mean, it's never going to happen. So we need to get Web3 into a place where it's user-friendly for people that aren't super technically proficient, which is most people, to be completely honest. So, right now Web3 is in a place where there's a huge barrier to entry for the majority of just tech consumers. So I think over the next few years, my expectation is that not only will the technology increase in quality, not only will we have more innovative solutions, more utility within the space, but we'll also see a lot of solutions that focus on abstracting blockchain layers behind UX usability, right? So hopefully we'll have applications in the future that allow you to interact with Web3. And the idea is that you probably won't even know that you're interacting with Web3 in a lot of cases, right? Web3 will enhance behind a lot of Web2 applications. We'll see games powered by Web3 backends that enables, non-fungible in-game assets, like tradable stuff or in-game tokens, or there's a million solutions, or like supply chain stuff and healthcare stuff. I mean, you can go on forever of like potential solutions, and all of these things would be abstracted behind multiple layers of usability to the point where most people won't even know that they're using a blockchain. It will just be integrated there, and the utility of blockchain will be integrated globally without everybody owning a MetaMask wallet. I don't see that as a realistic path to adoption. I think the more common thing is that people will use Web3 through Web2 systems as we do today, but just through a far more abstracted layer that makes it a lot easier to use. And I think that's how we'll approach mainstream adoption in the future. At least I hope so. Of course, who knows what will happen.
A good one, very, very controversial, I would think. Do you think builders should focus on what they really want to build, or put the users in front and center by building something they really need?
It's another interesting balance. A lot of the developers struggle with that in terms of like creating applications that are easy to use, but that they're passionate about. I think generally it's like what happens most of the time is that when you're building things, and a big misconception is like in Web3, when you build an application, like that's it. Usually if you build a good application, it turns into a company, and then people build on that and they improve it and stuff like this. But I think what's important is if you're building as an individual, definitely focus on what you want to build. Don't think too much about like, well, I wonder if people would find this useful, or I wonder if this and this, because like we've been mentioning, what's more important than anything at this stage in development is building something that you are personally passionate about, right? Like recently I submitted my first patent not too long ago, and it was for biometric Web3 technology. I can't get into too much about what that looks like practically, but essentially it enabled biometric interaction with Web3. And as I was building it, I was like, I just think this is a cool thing that I want to build. I wasn't thinking anything about like the potential adoption of it. I was just thinking like, I'm enjoying building this right now. And then once I built it, I realized this is a decent idea in terms of potential usage. So I patented it and I did all that stuff. But what's important is that once you build something that you're passionate about, that can later be implemented into more user-centric applications, right? So if you build, in my case, biometric interactivity technology that I was passionate about, right? It's not usable at all right now. Nobody would ever use it because it's just an application on my computer, basically. But at some point, if I wanted to run with it and I actually wanted to push for that to be adopted, then I could go through the means of creating an application and running it through more people and making it more user-friendly. Same thing goes with things, any Web3 application that you're building, right? If it's a wallet or if it's whatever, right? If you're building a Web3 application, first focus on what you want to build. And then if you want to, by the time you're finished building that, if you want to push that to actual adoption, if you want to create a company out of it, or if you want to create a patent out of it or whatever, that's when you can focus on creating something that's more usable. So focus on what you want to build now and then think about the users later. It might not be a great piece of advice for in-production developers, but when you're learning, it's really important to create something that first and foremost you want to create. Rather than what you think people want from you.
Yeah, I would add here, I think in the beginning, 100%, solve your own problem, follow your own passion, especially when you're learning. I think later on when you have a little bit more established company and you're getting some traction, I think that's when you do want to listen to your users a bit more rather than following your own ego, or especially when you're in a company working for someone, you definitely want to better understand what is that ultimate goal, what does the user actually want, because user is the one who's ultimately paying your salary. Or funding your company. It's better be user rather than VCs. Isaac Havertz is asking, is it possible to join Web3 without Web2 knowledge?
100%. When I first joined Web3 a few years ago, I knew Python and like basic JavaScript, but I knew almost nothing. And Web3 was like my first journey into most of technology, to be completely honest. And definitely you'll have a harder time getting started than somebody who is already completely proficient in Web2 development, because a lot of Web3 development is Web2 development at the end of the day. But I think generally you 100% can. It just would be a longer journey, right? Same thing with me. It took me years before I was in a place where I considered myself technically apt in any way. I actually had this question asked to me on Discord not too long ago, where somebody said, what should I learn in Web2 before I graduate to learning Web3? My piece of advice was that most skills that you learn in Web2 can be directly translated to Web3, right? So if you're learning Python, if you're learning how to create applications in Python, if you're learning JavaScript, if you're learning HTML, if you're learning CSS, React, whatever, these are all things that can be translated directly to Web3. Because like I said, Web3 depends on Web2 infrastructure. So if you know and understand Web2 infrastructure, then you can much better understand Web3. So before you commit to learning Web3 development, it's really important to nail down those Web2 foundations first. So understanding those programming languages, understanding network frameworks and how this all fits together on a Web2 side. So you can then take that knowledge and apply it to Web3. It'll be a longer journey, a longer learning path than somebody who already knows. But I think, at least from my experience, people who learn all of that at once usually retain it a lot better than somebody who's been working in Web2 for a long time. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll come out being pretty proficient in both Web3 and Web2.
Another quite similar question. I'm a Web2 developer for 8-9 years. And in the last year, I've been trying to move to Web3. But for now, as far as I understand from the tweet, they're not a full-time dev in Web3 just yet. I think they're just exploring on their own. But a majority of job descriptions in Web3 are not for juniors. Should they still apply? As far as I understood, that's what the person that was Andre is asking.
Yeah, I think what's most important is that you should be confident in your abilities, right? If you aren't confident in your ability to do something, then maybe don't apply for at least like high-level positions, right? Don't apply for a manager position if you aren't confident in your ability to navigate Web3. But I think that's the perfect opportunity. Being a Web2 developer for a long time puts you in a great position to very quickly pick up Web3 if you dedicate yourself to that. I can guarantee, as somebody with Web2 experience, you could probably find an internship in Web3. There's a few flying around right now. Somebody that's willing to teach you the ropes of how this industry works. If you can't find that, then learning it yourself is always a really great path, right? So you said you've been here for about a year. Take the next 6-12 months and continue engaging with the community. You're doing something great by being in a space like this right now. Of course, you're obviously engaged with the community. Build a project like we've been mentioning. What I usually like to say is that the best way to learn Web3 development is trial by fire, right? So it's throwing yourself into the flames of Web3 and just like figuring it out as you get there, right? It's like riding a bike, and you gotta keep falling on the bike until eventually you figure out how to balance yourself on it. Same idea with Web3 development. It's just, start building something, even if you have no idea how to build any of it. Even if you don't even know how to like send a transaction programmatically in Web3, then it's like, well, whatever, figure it out as you go on, and then just move through a project and move through different courses and stuff and learn as you go. And then once you're confident with your abilities, right? Once you're confident in your ability to develop Web3 applications and navigate the space in that way, in that technical way, that's when you can start applying to entry-level positions or higher-level positions. Or before then, if you want, internships are a really great way to learn some similar skills in a more professional environment.
Okay, one last question from Shivam. Or Shivam, do you wanna speak up? I think it's a very good question that he commented.
Of course, I thought I'd write it first. So hey, Ethan, big fan by the way. Quick question around cold emailing. So and me and Raman have had a discussion around this earlier as well, which is what are your thoughts around cold emailing to find opportunities in Web3? That's kind of one. Second part would be if there's a newbie they're trying to get into Web3, what should they include in their cold email if they're sending it to somebody like you? So kind of you can also explore general Web3 as well as DevRel specific tips if you want.
Sure, yeah. I think cold emails, or I guess just cold outreach in general, like, to be honest, I don't really respond to emails very often, but like, Twitter messages and any way in which you're reaching out to somebody, whether it's through an email or through Discord messages or Twitter messages that is unprompted. Like you mentioned, if you want to do that as a means of creating opportunities for yourself, which is a good way depending on who you reach out to, there's a way to go about it without seeming spammy or seeming like you're trying to scam somebody. And, I get a lot of messages, and I probably respond to 65% of them, and the rest of them I don't find convincing enough to warrant a response. Usually, a lot of the time they seem like spam. So I think the best way to cold email somebody or reach out to them with the intention of creating opportunity for yourself, so whether you are looking for something like an internship, or you just want advice, or you just want to build a relationship with somebody or learn from them or whatever it may be, doing so genuinely, right, is really important. So like reaching out and just telling them what you want. Just saying, hey, I'm looking for, I've been spending the last 3 years in Web3. I really want to start an internship and learn about DevRel, right? Do you have any recommendations on where I can go? Stuff like that. These are really powerful ways that not everybody will respond to. You'll probably get 20% of responses, so that's just how people are. But what's important is that one person that does respond to you and says yes, right? Or even like, if you're not looking for an internship, if you're just looking for like opportunities or to learn, a lot of people are happy to talk about themselves. Of course, this is what people like to do a lot. So messaging people and asking them questions about themselves or about their experience or whatever it may be, these are ways to engage with people, and you'll get a really high response rate from that. And I cold outreach to people a decent amount of time just to connect and chat. And the number one way to do it is to be genuine and to just talk to them as if you're talking to a friend almost, right? You're like asking for a favor almost. I see a lot of people that want jobs and want internships and reach out in ways that seem ingenuine, seem spammy. I see all the time people message me or put messages in public chats, and they're like putting their whole resume there and saying, oh, I can do this and this and this. And don't do that. At least that's my advice is don't do that. If you want something from somebody, whether it's to discover an internship or whether it's to learn something from them, be as genuine as you can with your message. And a lot of people will respond, and that's how you can derive value that way. It's just, talk to people as if you were talking to them in real life. I think is probably the best way to go about it.
Thanks so much, everyone, for the questions. This was really good. And thank you, Ethan, most of all, for your time and answering all the questions that we had today. This was really good. Any closing thoughts? Where can people find you? Is Twitter the best? Is LinkedIn better? Email, Chainstack? What's the best approach to connect with you?
Yeah, so I guess a few things on that. Number one, if you're in here and you're a developer and you want to leverage high quality and extremely affordable Web3 infrastructure, so these are things like RPC nodes and subgraphs and data APIs and IPFS and stuff like this. If you want to supercharge your applications, then you can go to chainstack.com and you can sign up for free and start leveraging really high performance RPC nodes straight from there. You can also, of course, follow our company account at Chainstack HQ. We post content there all the time where we talk about Web3 infrastructure, the development landscape, and we do Twitter spaces almost every single week over there where we talk about the same topics. Very developer facing stuff. So if you're a developer, make sure to follow us over there, as well as check out chainstack.com for all of your application infrastructure. On my end, I do a lot of similar discussions. I do a lot of technical concepts. I post videos and Twitter threads every single week that go into development concepts, so things like subgraphs and RPC nodes and creating applications and different ecosystems like Solana and Ethereum and stuff like this. So if you want to follow me and follow what I'm doing, you can also follow me at Tabasco Web3. I'm here in the space. I post a lot of content, including stuff about careers, from my sort of unique position. I'm always interested in talking about that as well. So if you're a developer, if you're on the technical side, make sure you go to chainstack.com, at chainstackhq, follow me at Tabasco Web3, as well as if you're just a general user of Web3, if you do business development, maybe non-technical stuff, then also feel free to reach out to me or follow me here at Tabasco Web3. Always happy to support those people as well. Really appreciate you guys having me on today. I think this was a super valuable conversation. We covered a ton of really important topics as it relates to DevRel, Web3, the ecosystem, the direction that it's going into, how you can start with a career, how developers can take advantage of the current landscape to create applications. and set themselves up for the next bull run. So like I said, super awesome discussion, and thank you everybody for your questions, and thank you guys for having me on today.
Thank you so much, Ethan. It was an absolute pleasure having you as a guest. Some closing thoughts from my end. Make sure to follow CryptoJobs as well. We post jobs every day from all around the world, remote, technical, non-technical opportunities. About the Twitter space itself, we try to do these every other week, and we're going to be recording them in video as well. So we're going to be posting this recording on YouTube, I think, in a week or so. Please follow both our Twitter account and our YouTube. We're going to be posting more frequent content there, again, about different topics, anywhere from technical to non-technical, finding jobs in the industry. And most importantly, please comment below what questions that came to your mind while watching this interview. It's really important to us, and we'll be able to answer them as soon as we can. And this also helps us come up with better, high quality, more interesting content that you guys would like watching. Yeah, also, don't forget to like and subscribe.